I purposefully up until recently haven't talked too much about any sightings that I've had. I don't feel that as an individual, my sightings are compelling enough that they provide evidence. They're just anecdotal.
Sure.
Something that I add to the pile of other people's stories and look for connections. But I'll give you a more detailed explanation. It was probably around 11:30. It was near midnight. I think between the hours of 11 and midnight. My family was asleep. It had been a long day. For some reason, I was still in my uniform. I was still in khakis, and I was sitting outside, chain smoking, and playing a video game called E-Republic. Um, and I've been hyper focused, very tunnel visioned on the screen, to the point that I didn't even see the whole world around me because you know how it is. I was outside in the dark at a little bistro table in my yard. Um, and looking back, I wasn't a meditator at the time, but looking back, that was flow state. I was in flow. I was writing and playing the game and very focused. And when I finally decided just to reach up and close the computer because I knew it was getting too late, I had to be up early and everything else. I closed the computer and I stood up and I was standing just outside my front door, facing due east, smoking a cigarette. And I was looking out at a totally clear night sky. And I was looking at the stars that were above the horizon, and they were blinking. They were going away. The stars were basically, being occluded by something. And I could tell that this thing was moving from the horizon slowly because of the way that stars were disappearing. But I couldn't figure out if I was looking at a large rain cloud. But I mean, all these things were happening at once, and a lot of it, the recall is weird to try to do. But I knew the wind was blowing in the opposite direction. A lot of things didn't make sense, and I'm squinting and really getting interested in what this thing is. And as it starts to actually, the apex of it starts to actually go over the top of my house, and people are going to ask me the altitude. It's really hard to gauge because the size of the thing was ridiculous. So it was at least, it seemed to be at least a couple of football fields wide, meaning a couple of 100 yards from tip to tip. I guess that would mean, equilateral because it was equilateral. It
Mm.
had no lights that I could see. Um, it was reflecting, now that I think about it, it was reflecting a small amount of moonlight. And I heard the wind going over. It seemed I heard the wind as it was moving. I heard the wind over the outside of the craft as if you were moving something large through the air, but there's no engine sound. As it passed overhead, I was kind of going ape. I mean, I just couldn't believe the tic tac had been 5 or 6 months before. And there was a 48-hour period on board the ship where I knew we had had a Roswell type event that should go down in history. And we didn't seem to care about it. And I think I kind of compartmentalized that. I went a lot
Yeah.
of different directions with it. I just assumed that's probably us. That was a really safe feeling to have, knowing I didn't want to be floating out for the next 12 years, knowing that there was crazy tech surrounding us. So who knows what I did psychologically? But five or so months later, I just wasn't ready to turn around and see that.
Yeah.
Um, and as it went over the top, as it went overhead, it sped up. And we used to have these two really large palm trees for reference that I turned around and I watched it go over the top of the palm tree. And I was going to lose sight of it right behind the palm tree. And I ran to the west end of my yard and jumped up on this rickety table we had built. And I remembered the next morning because I busted off the bistro umbrella. It's wooden, it had this little brass thing in the middle, and I just cracked it right in half, jumping up on the table to catch one last glimpse of this thing as it tipped over on its port wing edge. And just, we have this term in the Navy called, we say zorched. It's just zorched. It was, and I say it got smaller or it went away because without sound and light reference and no effect, given that we're talking about the phenomenon, we assume,
Yeah.
I can't say exactly what it did. It just receded. It went away from my vision and perception. And I stood on top of that table for probably 5 minutes, just jaw agape, repeating expletives under my breath. And I just went to bed. I never told anybody about that. I mean, I drew it. I wrote down what happened. Um, but I wasn't somebody who was like, "Holy crap! I just saw a giant UFO."
Yeah.
No, I told friends and family about the Tic Tac incident. Like I said, I wasn't asked to sign an NDA. There was no classification around it. And so when it came out in the news, they knew exactly what they were looking at. Friends and family, they were the ones that were telling me about the Times article. But people ask me, what did you think it was? Where do you think it's from? I don't have any of those answers. It was a big black triangle. It didn't make any noise. It was going super slow and it was way too big.
Yeah.
And at this point in my career, my second career of what we all do with this subject, I don't believe that was tech made by you and I or anybody with an email address or that pays taxes or lives in the world that we operate in. I can't find a way to make that fit. Um, but I know I saw what I saw. And when I
Of course.
got back up in the morning, I went out and the umbrella was broken.